Happy Monday, beautiful people. Hope you're doing well. We have a story for you. You remember we've been talking about the Fentanyl Czar for Canada that was appointed by Justin Trudeau, the one who is supposed to appease Donald Trump on the issue of the fentanyl crisis on our borders with the United States and the issues of the United Front, Mexican cartels, and so on. You know, all that nonsense, all that stuff that was going on. Sitting here 4 months later, wondering, where's he been at? Where's he at? What's going on? And quite frankly, guess what? The United States was wondering the same thing, and they got an answer that we were afraid was real. It was true. And baby, we're getting into it today. Welcome to the LIVID podcast. I'm your host, Josh. If you get any value from today's episode, take the time to like, share, and subscribe. Helps us to grow, helps us get to new audiences, and helps people see that there's something different than what the mainstream media has to offer, which we're going to show in spades today. Now, let's get into her story, shall we? So from August 25th of the Bureau, Sam Cooper writes this headline: Canada's Fentanyl Czar reportedly told U.S. officials, sorry to tell you, I have no authority. I don't know. I can't do anything. Oh my gosh. U.S. officials say Canada's Fentanyl Czar admitted having no authority over RCMP, undermining Carney's assurances of historic border measures. Reason why I'm laughing is just keep me from crying about it, if I'm being honest. Oh my gosh. Jeez. Ottawa's newly appointed Fentanyl Czar told U.S. officials in Ottawa he has no authority to influence Canadian federal police or border agencies, according to an official with knowledge of the relevant meetings. For U.S. enforcement experts, the admission underlined what they describe as the emptiness of Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney's high-profile pledges to crack down on transnational fentanyl production and trafficking by Chinese and Mexican syndicates, and underscored systemic failures in Canada's response to cartels exploiting the nation's ports, borders, and infrastructure. Ottawa's response this year to President Donald Trump's threat of fentanyl interdiction tariffs, including the high-profile Czar position, promises to join cross-border gang task forces and pledges to strengthen our border security, has been described by U.S. and Canadian enforcement sources as largely performative, lacking both a real authority and the baseline cooperation with U.S. counterparts needed to address Canada's vulnerability. The Trudeau government named Kevin Brazeau as Canada's first fentanyl czar in February, responding to Canada's warning of sweeping tariffs. According to U.S. government sources, Brazeau soon met officials from the State Department, Homeland Security Investigations, and the DEA. While cordial, the meetings left American counterparts with the perception that Brazeau had no real authority and no capacity to implement improvements. Oh, surprise, surprise. We have someone in power, with someone who has a name, title, and that's all they got. They got a badge. $5 from Staples. That's what we have right now. Is we knew this was going to happen. We talked about when it happened. I remember being on the show talking about this and being like, this is likely what's going to happen. However, I'm praying for the sake of our country that this is not the case. I hope that Kevin Brazeau is passionate about this. I hope that he wants to push change forward. I hope that he's given the authority to do those things so that we can take care of and clean this mess up at home. Fast forward 4 months later, here we are. Here we are. It's not looking good. We end up going down here to finish off. For U.S. officials, the core problems between Washington and Ottawa involve weak laws, porous borders, and information sharing impediments. Canadian officials often cite the Supreme Court's Stinchcomb ruling, which requires extensive disclosure of evidence to the defense as a barrier to intelligence-driven cases. U.S. experts argue these rules, combined with political sensitivities, prevent Canadian agencies from targeting major transnational drug traffickers even when there's clear investigative intelligence, including wiretap material. Meetings followed Trump's threats and Trudeau's announcement, a source said, including with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, on efforts to create a new CBSA RCMP border interdiction team. But U.S. sources said seizures credited to the effort, such as the February 2025 CBSA announcement of 6 seizures appointing 56.1 grams of fentanyl, including 20 fentanyl pills and 23 grams of suspected fentanyl from 2 U.S. citizens crossing at the Windsor-Detroit tunnel, were rooted in American intelligence sharing with little or no reciprocation from Ottawa. So this is where we're at. In terms of this case, this is a conversation that isn't at top of mind right now in Canada because Trump isn't talking about it. Carney's not talking about it. And it's led to the conversation being about the auto industry, steel and tariffs, this, that, the other. But this has not changed. Nothing has changed. Things are actually getting worse. And the issues that spanned across administrations in the United States is the fact that our RCMP, our officials, and our crime units have not been working with United States intelligence. It even happened during the Joe Biden administration, if you remember, where one of his top officials said that we don't trust Ottawa anymore. We can't work with Canada because of the lack of information that they're even sharing with us, and we can't even trust the information that is coming from them. And that was Biden's administration. This isn't just a Trump issue. This has been spanning across administrations at this point in the United States, and they've all had the same thing to say about us, that we're hard to work with, we don't do anything, and it's the United States who are just carrying their weight on this. And it started with Trudeau, and it's continuing with Mark Carney. Lots of fanfare, a lot of conversations, a lot of big statements, a lot of big announcements. We saw this on Friday. And guess what? Nothing is going to happen because Mark Carney is only in it for Mark Carney. He's already implementing policies to continue this green grift so that the companies that he's closely tied to get rich. That's what this is going on. That's the focus of him right now. But we are in so much danger right now when it comes to this fentanyl issue that we have China, again, sending over precursors. You have the United Front, you have the Mexican cartels working, you have this, that, the other going on the West Coast and then also permeating throughout our country. This isn't by accident. This was going on for decades at this point, all to get to where we are now. Geopolitical tensions are very, very high at the moment. China is not our friend. Russia is not our friend. Iran is not our friend. North Korea, not our friend. But we've allowed them so much access to our country. We have Iran, who's funding the likes of groups like Hamas and other groups in our country to create dissension and issues through the messaging of free Palestine. We have China pushing drugs into our country and using us as a launching pad to be able to get into the United States. And we just don't take it seriously. Because Canada doesn't want to acknowledge its issues. It wants to keep showing to the rest of the world that we're just a nice place. We just love people. But no, we are in serious trouble. And things are only getting worse. So if we don't start clamping down on these issues here at home, we're going to be in a whole host of trouble if things start popping off on a world level. I'll show you what I mean. It's from The Sun. They reported this last week. Prepare for war. France orders hospitals to ready for World War III and treat hundreds of wounded soldiers per day in less than a year. Did you hear that? You reading that? France is ordering their hospitals to start getting ready for wartime conditions. It says health bosses have been told to brace for a major engagement by March of 2026 with chilling instructions to be ready to treat a flood of wounded troops from across the continent. This is an infographic that they've published and been circulating in the country. According to documents obtained by Le Canard and Chenet, the plan assumes France will become a hub for battlefield casualties. If you need to absorb hundreds of injured soldiers from both its own forces and those of NATO allies. The French Ministry of Health said the order was designed to anticipate, prepare, and respond to the health needs of the population while integrating the specific needs of defense in the health field. Among the risks identified, officials warned was the prospect of a huge influx of foreign victims. The ministry bluntly admitted it is therefore a question for our health system of anticipating the care of military patients in the civilian health system. And while Paris frames it as a major engagement, the reality is far starker. Under NATO's Article 5, if France was attacked, or if Russian troops stormed into any allied nation, the whole alliance would be pulled in. That chain reaction would almost certainly drag in Britain, the US, and much of Europe, transforming a regional clash into the nightmare of World War III. The warning comes as Germany's top general confirmed NATO will be on high alert during Russia's Zapad 2025 war games in Belarus. General Karsten Brewer said Moscow's drills could be a smokescreen for something far darker. We don't have any indication that preparations for an attack are taken under the cover of the exercise. But we'll be on our guard, not just the German forces, but NATO. The stakes could not be higher. NATO chief Mark Rutte has already sounded the alarm that Russia and China together could light the fuse on World War III. He laid out a nightmare scenario in July. Beijing seizes Taiwan while Putin strikes NATO territory, possibly the Baltic republics of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. That is most likely the way this will progress, he warned. In a chilling interview, he added, They are now producing 3 times as much ammunition in 3 months as the whole of NATO is doing in a year. This is unsustainable. This stuff is very real. And it starts with our job here at home. Right now, what we're seeing is battle lines starting to be drawn. Trump and the US have been telling NATO to get their crap together, get their act together, and start spending money on their defense because they've been seeing what China's been doing. They've been seeing what Russia's been doing. They've been seeing what Iran's been doing. And US can't do it all on their own. They need their NATO allies to pick up their slack and do their job. And it comes back down to the fentanyl crisis here at home, is if we don't take what's going on our territory seriously, it's going to open us up to a whole lot of problems. We've said already, we have the extremists operating in our borders with impunity. So if things pop off, you think all those people who are funded for these Free Palestine protests are going to fight on the side of NATO? No. They're going to be well within our borders, ready to go. The whole thing of the threat that Iran's been throwing around for years about sleeper cells, I believe there's a degree of truth to that. And we're seeing even with these protests where they're so well funded and well organized that you wonder what is even happening. And I don't share this all to scare you. I just mainly just want to make you be aware of what is currently taking place and how our government's not taking it seriously. And it needs to start being taken a heck of a lot more seriously than it has been. Because we saw it last week. Leaders of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran gather in Beijing for huge military parade in challenge to the West. That wasn't just a, hey, let's make us feel good. That was 100% a whole production aimed at showing the West that they are ready to go if things got real. And France warning their hospitals is not the first either. Sweden and Finland warned their residents last year to be ready for war because the situation is getting serious. Sweden and Finland have begun warning their residents to prepare for the possibility of war as Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine rages on. Stockholm on Monday published its latest version of In Case of Crisis of a War, a pamphlet instructing civilians on how to prepare and ride out a national crisis that was lent out in 2018. The pamphlet, which was been issued 5 times in World War II, is now twice as long at 32 pages and focuses on war preparations as the Swedish government warns of the worsening situation in Ukraine. You have the Ukraine issue with Russia and Ukraine. You've been seeing that going on. You have the whole situation happening with Israel, Palestine, and Iran funding Hezbollah, Hamas, and all this. So that's the second front. Then you have China, who's threatening to take over Taiwan. These 3 countries are doing what they've been doing. And the West has just been like, okay. And our media apparatus has not taken any of it seriously. That's why it comes back to the issue of, last thing I'll mention, is the 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. I'm realizing I've become the minority on this issue, not just in liberal circles, but also in the conservative circles, that this is a good policy because people are so close-minded and so focused on consumers, so focused on what they can buy, what they can get, that you don't realize that us trying to buy Chinese EVs in the midst of where things are at in the geopolitics right now is a terrible idea. And the pushback, it's like, well, they make our phones. Like, I get it. And I think we should bring that all back home too. We don't need to make Chinese-made EVs easier to buy here in Canada because of what they've been doing. You can see what China's been doing. You can see what they've been doing to our country. And you want to give them more access to our market? Oh, but it might get the canola tariffs off. We need to find something different then, because you cannot relent on that tariff policy. Poilievre came on our show and talked about that, and he was in agreement. People need to stop being so short-sighted of what's going on outside our borders as well. As much as it comes from the liberals, and I don't like their motivations for doing it in the first place, I'm happy about the policy anyways, because it's actually a national security issue more than a consumer issue at this point. And I'll stand by that. I will fight on that. And I'll take on anyone who wants to come and talk to me about that. But anyways, enjoy your Monday. Have yourselves a good one. I'm out.